This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. All right. Good morning, Kelly.
It is good morning.
It's still morning.
It's still morning. Yep.
Well, hopefully our editor, Calvin, can edit out some of the background noise that you're currently hearing. But so I'm at a different location with my kids. So
and they're a little grumpy.
Sometimes they're grumpy.
Yeah. Are they right now? Or are they just playing?
They're just being kids, being loud.
Awesome.
Yep. And my background doesn't work. Got a kind of junky background, but whatever.
What do we need to do? That's all right. Sometimes I'm in a hotel room.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. A little less busy in the background though. But all right, let's see. So I'm gonna start off with a couple articles, and I'm gonna try to show this because I want to say it's funny to me, but
but it's not funny.
It's not funny what's happening, but it's I don't know. I guess it's just kind of crazy. Like, I don't know why people make things like this. This will pop up. So look at this. So the first article is student arrested after bringing a gun-shaped lighter to a high school. So, like, this, it looks like a pistol with like a little like compensator or type of thing on the front. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't look like a lighter at all.
But it also had a light on it, right? It had
it looks like it's got like this little like tactical light or something they had attached to it. Like, what in the world?
Yeah.
I was like, my goodness. So I don't know
what you want to talk about that.
I don't know what the intent was.
Well, I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, is it just to scare someone, or is it like the worst thing of like, hey, I don't want to be here anymore kind of thing,
The idea is they want people to think they have something they don't. In the early days of airsoft, we saw lots of kids carrying airsoft guns and
into school,
just around and just all over. It's one of those things when you get to them, then they say, "Oh, it's just an airsoft." Okay, dude, but you understand what the potential is here. There's laws in a lot of states about, and it's almost as bad, not quite as bad, but almost as bad as owning an actual firearm. And I would think in a school setting, of course I didn't read that article, but I would think in a school setting that there would be criminal punishment for carrying what we call a replica firearm, because the potential is that somebody misinterprets what it is, and many times that's the idea. Even though it's just a lighter, which is a silly thing to do, but it's a lighter that looks like a Glock, right? And it looks like somebody enhanced that appearance by putting a tactical light on it. So when you start enhancing the replica with other stuff on it, theoretically, if it's a good replica of the firearm, you might be able to put like an optical sight on it, like a red dot or something like that. So when you start enhancing it, it becomes more and more like a firearm and less like this sort of replica piece. And the potential is you pull that out at the wrong time and somebody gets shot with it, right? Or somebody does something else or what have you. So there were, as you can imagine, early on, there were a lot of tragedies because somebody was pointing this replica at somebody else. Somebody called the law enforcement on it. on what they'd seen, and they go to contact the person with the replica, and they pull it out of because they're kids, they don't know any better, right? They pull it out of their jacket or their backpack or whatever, and they turn and face law enforcement. And you can imagine what the result of that might be, right? So this is when you started seeing the requirements for the red barrel or some identification to make it readily identifiable. Of course, you had the other chuckleheads that would paint the end of a real gun's barrel red or whatever, but it's all part of that. But if you're bringing something like that to school, you're not bringing it for the lighter functionality.
No.
So you want somebody to believe that you have a gun, and whether that's so people don't pick on you, or that you are using it for protection, or whatever the reason is, it's not the right way to do this, right? And I'm actually surprised we haven't seen more and more of this.
Oh, like replica stuff?
Yep. Because
it's funny. It's funny that you say that, because I have another article for you.
Because replicas are easy to get, and oftentimes people possess or buy replicas for that very purpose, right?
Yeah.
And the other danger here is, and this, well, I'll always go back to this. What is the real purpose? And we've talked about what could be the real purpose. The intent could be, I want you to think I have one so you don't mess with me. It could be for the idea that I have something I'm going to show you that will make you believe I have a gun so you don't pick on me and I can protect myself. That kind of stuff. It gives that sort of doubt in somebody else's mind. But what else could it be, Ethan?
Probing.
You're getting it. That's right. It could be, I want to see if I can smuggle a gun onto campus. And if I get caught, it's not a gun. It just looks like a gun. So you would have the same issue here, or the same potential, if somebody brought like a prop gun onto campus, or a gun that all it shoots is blanks. It's not even, it fires, but not a bullet, right? So you would have the same concerns. Why are you bringing this? What's the purpose? Are you bringing this to see if you can get that fire, how far you can get in without getting caught? And then you're going to just claim, I only had it because it's a lighter. Okay, what are you lighting? Why are you bringing that? Why do you have a flashlight on it? Are you lighting things in the dark? Are you an arsonist? Are you, those types of things? Is there a legitimate reason? I suppose you could come up with one, but there's much better ways to have a lighter, I guess.
Yeah.
Without having it look like a gun.
So the next one is a 14-year-old was arrested after bringing a pellet handgun. So now we're kind of stepping up a little bit of like something that actually will shoot a projectile, but not, a full-fledged firearm, I guess. So it was, a CO2 powered pellet gun, but as a pistol, which also looks like a Glock. So I mean, this is something you actually like take someone's eye out and stuff with. So there's that.
The right shot, the right place could do some serious damage, if not not kill them, right?
Yeah. So,
but
I mean, it's interesting that it's how we talk about like, could this be probing? And it's like, oh, it's not a real gun. Like you can't do anything because it's not real. But no, well, it's this kid just got arrested. A 14-year-old got arrested for bringing a pellet gun. So
so there's, again, you're looking at the next step, right? You're bringing something that actually shoots a projectile, even though it's CO2. Those little pellets. I mean, I had a pellet gun when I was little, and those things could kill small animals. They're oftentimes used specifically for that. And if you were using it for protection, you could easily ward off somebody who was attacking you, right?
Yeah, so your chances of like killing them would be pretty
reduced.
slim.
But you could get them off you. So, it's not as serious as a firearm, but it's still pretty serious. It would also, in fact, some states classify air-powered guns as firearms. So,
I mean, there's those like competition ones are pretty powerful.
yeah,
Those
and
are
accurate. It's not
Yeah.
like you can aim them, you can get your targets, you can get proficient at them. The caliber, I think, is essentially the same as a 22 firearm. So again, it's why are you doing that? What's the purpose of that? And that's what you have to drill into. And you can't just leave it as it was an accident. I don't know how people forget firearms, forget that they're carrying a firearm, because you hear about it all the time at the airports, right? People walk through a TSA. You're walking through TSA. How did you forget that you had a firearm in your bag? First of all, well,
It's pretty dumb.
I don't carry a firearm anymore anyway, but you understand the weight. And if you always carry it and you forget that you're carrying it, that it just seems irresponsible. I don't know.
I mean, if you're getting on a plane, I feel like that's if you're
right.
if you're a law-abiding citizen, I feel like that's the first thing you should be checking for.
Right.
Like, all right, I'm gonna make sure I do this so I don't like go to prison.
But it happens all the time.
Hello?
Right? And I would be very reluctant to believe anybody who told me I forgot I had it. I would be very reluctant to believe that.
It would take a lot to persuade me to believe that.
Yeah, and even the replicas, even the pellet guns, they have some weight to them. And when you pick up that backpack or book bag or whatever, purse or whatever, then, and it's not the same weight, you got to ask yourself a question. Ooh, I forgot I had my gun in there, whatever reason you had that in there for. But you have to ask those questions. You have to ask, are you probing? And I would go even further. I would start looking at social media and see if there's any indication. I would see if there's any prior contacts, any threats made, even if they were unfounded threats. If you have an unfounded threat that was reported, and then a month or two later, somebody has a replica firearm or a pellet gun or an actual firearm, those things tie
they're literally going up the pathway of violence.
Yeah.
You're literally describing that.
You're looking at the epitome, and now you have to start putting it all together. You got to see where it all started and where they're actually at with that. Because the other intent, which is equally as concerning, is the phenomena of suicide by cop, right? I'm going to go in and I'm going to cause something, and I'm going to pull the gun out when the cops show up and let them take care of it.
Because that's still technically like a pathway to violence. It's just violence to yourself, essentially.
It's a hazard. Every hazard, every threat has a pathway. Right? We know that. So every hazardous condition, everything that we think of, and we've said this many times, there's a pathway to it. There's a start and a finish. We can determine a correct or better intervention and pathway of intervention if we understand the pathway and we recognize somebody's on the pathway. And if we're looking at somebody who has suicidal tendencies or suicidal ideation, and then they show up at a place with a replica or a firearm, we're always, from a law enforcement perspective, we're going to always treat it as though it's a firearm. And then hopefully we can determine quick enough that it's not an actual firearm, but that's difficult to do. If you only have
a second to determine that,
it's difficult at best, right?
Yeah.
So it's a pathway to violence, but it's more of a pathway to suicide. But we've talked about that, how short that bridge is from suicidal ideation to homicidal ideation. Understanding that there's that short bridge there, that adds a level of complexity as to what it is. And so you have to determine that by the actions, but it certainly is on some pathway. You can't just say, oh, the guy's just a knucklehead and happened to bring this pellet gun in. You have to do your research. You have to say why, what was the intent, where are they going with this? And I'm going to say this until I'm blue in the face. If somebody just says it's a mistake, I forgot about it, and you let it at that, you are not doing your job. Plain and simple. You are not doing your job. You have to find out until you're satisfied what the intent was. You have to keep digging and then act on what you believe that intent was based upon your research. You can't just say, okay, you're being stupid, but I got to call the cops. And the cops come and they arrest and then they go about their day. And, that's worth discussing just a little bit because the cops are going to come in, solve the problem, and move on. We've talked about that, right? When they're talking about threat assessments and stuff, their job is to determine whether there's a criminal threat. And if somebody is told, hey, this kid just walked into campus, they had a replica or a pellet gun or whatever, and we need them dealt with. Cops are going to come and take the quickest action they can because they've done what they're supposed to do. And what is that? They've interrupted the pathway. They interrupted it. So they intervened with a criminal, a criminal arrest or whatever, taking them to the juvenile facilities. And now they have another problem to go to. But we have to go back and start talking to everybody. So there's further obligation there. But you can't just say, oh, that was resolved by the cops, because the cops did their job, but that's a very limited in scope, right? So you need to follow that up. That kid is going to come back to your campus.
Right.
When you're doing threat assessments and stuff, we call that a reentry plan. What are you going to do? How are you going to keep them off if that's your job? Off campus? For how long can you do that legally? All of these things need to be considered. During an assessment, I had a principal saying, that kid will never come back to this campus. I said, that's not up to you. He says, yes, it is. He says, no, it's not. Kid has a right to an education. So you have to plan on how that kid is going to be reintegrated into your campus. What's going to happen when they come back? And they said, I'm telling you, that kid will never come back. And I said, okay, great. Maybe you're right. But what if he does?
Right. Still got a plan for that. What if?
Right? What if he does? And then they said, well, what if I do all this planning and they don't come back? Well, then you give that planning and that plan that you've documented, because that's what you need to do. And you give it to the school that's going to get them, because there's a school somewhere that's going to get them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And you grab the principal from the other school and say, hey, this is what happened. This is how we handle it. Here's my plan to reintegrate them. Use it or don't. But at least you've done your job, and let them figure out how they're going to reintegrate the kid back into their school. If we're not sharing that information, it's silly.
There. I got a couple more for you if you'd like. We're kind of increasing in threat, I guess.
Uh-huh.
An unloaded handgun was taken from a student in, I think this was North Carolina. This was on Monday. I mean, all these things that happened the last couple of days, by the way. And so the interesting with this is, so even though it was unloaded, the student's mother was arrested and charged with failing to properly store a firearm.
Yep. So we're going to see that.
Like, a couple of years ago with, the big event, like, we're starting to see more and more like accountability for the parents or the guardians who are in charge of these kids that are allowing them to even have access to firearms. Essentially, now the parents are now being charged, not just the students. Let
me take that aspect of it, right? So we're responsible for our kids. We've always been, since I was a kid. My mom, there were oftentimes, because I was personally too young for legal consequences, my parents were responsible, if nothing else, for correcting the issue, paying for the damage or what have you, right? They were responsible. That's been around forever.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have lost sight of that. And
yeah, my kid never. You're wrong. My kid's
that's
an
right.
angel.
That's right. And we've gotten to where we overprotect our kids from consequences. Kids, I think, have to learn consequences. But we're seeing more and more consequences coming to the parents. And in fact, I think it was over the week, maybe late last week. I think it was late last week. Mother was charged with vehicular homicide, I believe, when her 14-year-old, I think it was a son, was riding an electric motorcycle and ran over a substitute teacher. And oh no, he's in critical condition. So it was not homicide. I think it was a hit and run causing severe major injuries. So the mother was specifically charged because the kid was seen recklessly driving several months, like back in September or something, was contacted by law enforcement and told of the potential consequences. So then she continued to allow him to ride the electric motorcycle. And this was in California. There are, as the e-bikes are being used more and more, there's been more and more restrictions. So at the time that I was in California enforcing these laws, they weren't even in existence because e-bikes were just coming onto the scene, and there was confusion about how you enforce that stuff. But right now, it's pretty specific, and it's categorized by the potential speed and power of the e-bike. So the lower the power, and if you're driving, like if it goes up to like 15 miles an hour or something like that, then no license is required. But as soon as you start going above that, then you get more and more, and then it becomes an electric motorcycle. And this particular one was capable of exceeding like 60 miles an hour.
Wow.
And the
what the heck?
The kid was riding through campus or riding near campus and was popping a wheelie and going through like an intersection, and the substitute teacher was walking across and got hit, and the kid never saw him because he's up in the air, right, and so forth. So, but the other part of that is, especially in California, even bicycles are covered under the California Vehicle Code, and so you have to ride it. If you're negligently riding it and you cause an accident because you weren't obeying basic traffic laws, you can be charged, right? So you can be charged with drunk driving on a bicycle. You don't have to have a license, but you can be charged with riding a bicycle while intoxicated. So you have to stop at a stop sign. You don't need a license, but you have to stop at a stop sign. So what I'm saying is that there's more and more of these circumstances where people are being injured and parents are being held accountable for it. And so I hope that works, but I think we're seeing it, especially in the active shooter scenarios where parents are being charged. The kid might not be, or may be additionally charged, but the parents are also being charged. And sometimes it's both parents.
Yeah.
Right. So in the case of this electric motorcycle, she's facing up to like 6 or 7 years in state prison.
That's crazy.
Because she failed to be a parent.
Wow.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
So going back to it's one of those, you're going to charge that kid. Unloaded, loaded is going to have that same sort of impact. But obviously an unloaded replica isn't a thing because it's always unloaded. It's not going to carry the same weight, but it is going to say, look, here's the law that says you have to maintain control and store this firearm safely so that kids can't get to it. And you don't.
This last one I was talking about seemed like it was a real handgun.
Yeah, but you don't get to say, I didn't know he had it.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a defense.
No, it's not.
So it's up to the adult to say, you can't have access. If you want access, you come to me and we'll talk about it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a gun safe with guns in it. You know who knows the combination to it? Me.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
If my wife wants something out of it, she comes and talks to me about it.
Yeah.
Can you get something? Because I also keep documents and stuff in it. But if she wants something, she tells me to go get it. So, I mean, that's how, when my son started buying firearms, I was very, very strict on saying, okay, dude, when you start buying these, this is what it means. And he now has, first of all, now he has a lot more guns than I do. But he has a big safe for him.
Yeah.
And his wife also has firearms. So it's not just him, but they're both military people. So that's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when we start talking about bringing them in or around schools, I'll go back to why.
Yeah.
What was the intent? What are they going to do that? Why are they possessing it? Whether it's an actual lighter that looks like a firearm, why are they enhancing the appearance of it? They're doing it for some reason. And it could be as innocuous as, I want to show that I have, I want to act like a bad guy, I got a gun, right? But when, that kind of attention stokes some egos and stuff. But when you start talking and you need to go, because there's the other side of it, you need to figure out that it's not part of the probing and not part of an ongoing threat somewhere, or a emerging threat somewhere.
I think I did have another one for you, and then here was the other interesting one. So a student was arrested after fleeing campus after being found with a loaded firearm. So now
we're just escalating right on up, aren't we?
Yeah, I did this on purpose. So a loaded firearm in his bag. The interesting part of this one is what they call a ghost gun. So that means, according to the article, the serial number of the gun was scratched off. And I can tell you by looking at the picture that's in the article that it's one of these. It looks like one of these lowers that you can turn from non-functional to functional.
Yeah.
One of those.
You machine it.
Yeah, that's the interesting part to me, is how did a student, so this is a high school, so how does a high school student acquire something like that in the first place and then get what?
Yeah.
Am I just that naive? Am I just that sheltered that I'm
yeah, probably. So when you're talking about lowers and uppers, you're talking about an AR platform generally.
This is a pistol.
Awesome.
Yep.
But that being said, there's every firearm.
Yeah.
Starts as a block of metal.
Yes.
And in order to produce a firearm, you have to start shaving away pieces of metal or stamping metal or doing whatever it is to change that metal from a block to a functioning firearm. Yep. You with me?
Pretty simple way of saying it, but yes.
Well, I'm trying to be simple for the people.
Well, you probably legally actually can't describe how you do this, so
no,
keep that in mind.
Yeah. So here's the deal. At some point, that block of metal ceases to being a block of metal and becomes a firearm, right? Yeah. And this is always the battle that we have between ATF and those people who like to do these. There are lots of legitimate reasons why you want to build your own firearm, but this is always the battle of balance between ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. The ones who control what a firearm is, right? They're the ones who define what it is, what is legal to possess, and what is not legal to possess. So if it's not a firearm, it does not come under the purview of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. It's still a block of metal. even if it
Yep.
looks very similar to a firearm, right? It's still a block of metal. So I can still go out without a license, without any whatever, and buy this block of metal. And then I make it a firearm. And as soon as I cross that line, it becomes illegal. So the answer to your question, how does a high schooler get that? Very simple, right? They're buying a block of metal. The illegal part comes when they transform it or they go that one step too far. So that's always been the legal battle that we have. So how do they acquire it? They're buying a block of metal.
How they know someone who knows how to make these, and
right? That's exactly right.
that's
So
the path you got to go down. Is like, all right, who's distributing these? Because that's the
that's
that's
well, but
that's a bigger no is
yeah.
making them and then distributing them. That's
Well, just making them's huge because you can distribute them, and the manufacturing taking that step is not illegal. It's not. It's the fact that you don't serialize it and register it with ATF. That's the illegal part, right? Because they have to make sure that everything else is conforming to the standard. That's the issue, right? So it's simple to buy a block of metal. The difficult part is transforming it into. So that's the bigger question, right? Is where did he get the knowledge? Where did he get the machinery? Where did he get the what have yous to actually turn it into a firearm? The other part is obviously he obtained it illegally somehow. Maybe the parent is doing it, right? I haven't seen the story, but there's lots of ways that can occur. The other simple way is what the article said happened. But if you think it was a homemade firearm as opposed to a legitimately made one and the serial numbers were removed, then that's
it looks like that. I'm not 100% sure, but
but you can,
based on what I see from the image, I'm like,
it is easy to remove serial numbers. There's ways to recover that. So I'm not going to tell you how that happens, but there's ways to recover that. So
I'm intrigued.
Yep.
That was the last one I had for you.
Yeah. So today's Firearm Wednesday, but there are so many things, right?
We've talked for 40 minutes about
firearms, but there's a reason
this all
we're
happened
talking
recently. This is all stuff that's like happened in the last week.
Yeah, and so
like what is going on, Kelly? Like
what? So that's the bigger concern, right?
I laugh because it's like kind of a nervous laughter. By the way, for people who don't know me, it's just kind of like a
what's going on left, right?
Yeah, it's like it blows my mind. Like I never heard of this stuff when I was a kid, and now it seems like it's literally happening almost every day.
Yeah, and some of it, and don't get me wrong, I think we should, but some of it's the way that things are being reported now. There are things that are
sure, like maybe we're seeing there must be some part of it where like people are more aware of it and people feel more confident to report things. So that's why you're seeing more of it.
Yeah, and to some extent. And we're still seeing more of it, right? And that's the concerning factor is why is this happening? And what are we doing to stop it? What are we doing to cause it? Right? We're still, we oftentimes we look at somebody's being bullied, somebody needs this for protection, somebody needs it to prey on people, somebody, we look at it from a very narrow perspective, and we have to look at the bigger picture is what are we doing to cause an environment or impact an environment where more and more kids believe they need to take firearms or carry firearms with them to school or around in public as a protective thing. We mentioned this a little bit, and I'll just mention it here. I don't want to get into the whole thing, but this becomes part of that newest trend that we're seeing, and that's these teenage takeovers of areas of cities where there's hundreds, if not sometimes thousands, of kids that converge on a single area and just wreak havoc all over the place. But part of that is when you go down there and you think you're just going to vandalize something or get into minor trouble, shots are being fired, fights are happening, people are being stabbed, law enforcement's getting involved, law enforcement's getting injured, these things like this. What's causing that type of behavior? What are we doing as a society that makes 1,000 kids organize? Because you can't just say you have 1,000 kids completely unorganized show up at a place at the same time and say, "Woo, we got this." It's organized, right? So
they're communicating on some platform for sure.
Some platform, and they're spreading the words. It's like back in the day when I was a kid, who's having a kegger, right? Who's having a keg party? You knew about it. It was organized, right? But they're taking this to a whole new level. And what are we doing that causes these kids to believe that they can do that? And I'm not even going to get into the whole protest culture that we've created, but I would venture to say that there's some root there, but I'll leave it at that. But that's part of this whole thing. Kids probably started going to these places completely unarmed. Completely, we're going to just, cause a bunch of, juvenile trouble. But then there's fights started. People started threatening other people. And now there's this free for all where people now have to feel like they have to protect themselves. Again, is this a threat to our community? Yes. If it's a threat, there was a pathway.
Yes.
We can figure out what that pathway is if we want to. There are people much smarter than Kelly around here that can figure that out. But I can tell you there's a pathway, and we can look at the way that we're parenting, the way that our communities are acting or not acting together. What's happening at schools, right? We're seeing more and more firearms. We're seeing more and more teachers being arrested. This is some of it is reporting, but we're seeing it more and more. And there's so much happening in politics and so forth that are detrimental to what we're doing. So we need to start figuring that out, or where this is going to continue. And frankly, having experienced a smaller version of this, I say smaller, more condensed version of this, every year at Halloween and every year at the spring break time, we could see this kind of behavior that went back to the early 90s, but it's just getting bigger and bigger. So we need to figure that out. We need to start addressing that, whatever. And that has to be done collectively. You can't just say, "Oh, it's law enforcement's job." No, it's not. It's society's problem.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.